We'll look at a group of less well-known defences now. I mean, they're all okay to try, I guess, but they're uncommon enough that I think I can give you a quick line against each of them, and that will do for a bit. So after we get into the Scotch game, Bishop b4 check. Odd looking, because it seems to lose a move and makes you make a move that you might play anyway with c3. But there's, let's see exactly what's happening on the position, and if we can get on with it. Bishop e7 for black, and I suppose the logic is that we've taken away the c3 square that we might have wanted to use for our knight. Bishop c4 I think is perfectly fine, and one of the moves that we might want to play is e5 at some point. Well, let's look at the main line. So knight f6 takes on c6, takes on c6, e5, and black's getting pushed around a little bit. In the main lines, in the Mises variation, black can reply to this with queen e7, which is reckoned to be okay. But in this position, the black knight has to escape straight away to e4, queen f3, d5, e takes d6, knight takes d6, and now we've got some awkwardness for black with these doubled isolated c pawns. Bishop to d3 now, and castles, and maybe this is equal, but I think that I'd certainly prefer to play white here. We've got perfectly sound position and ideas, and the long-term trend of this position, I think, is going to be about these c pawns. So that's a line with e5. If black wants to stop it, I just think you get a normal sort of Scotch advantage with a better centre. Castles, rook e1, sort of line I like, really. Little advantage for white. Black's solid, but has got no real plans about how to continue the rest of the game. So still a game, still plenty of chess to play, but I think that's good for. I think that's quite fine for white. Next variation is queen to f6, borrowing an idea to play immediately. If you want to transpose into the classical variation with bishop to c5, you can do. If you play knight takes c6, bishop c5, queen d2 is one of the options that you have for white on against the classical variation. Grandmasters play it a lot, but I think this blocking in the bishop is unnatural enough that I don't want to encourage it. So after queen f6, I'm going to suggest knight to b5. Bishop to c5, threatening checkmate. Queen e2 is important, and now black defends the c7 point. We'll develop our knight. We'll play bishop to e3, and now black's got a problem on c7. Bishop to a5 and castles long, and I think this is a nice position for white. Better centre. You do need to sort out your development on f1, but I think this is a position from which you can play for a win quite happily as white, and you've got a normal sort of Scotch plus in the centre, and that's a good thing to have going on. Next variation, knight takes d4, g6. Now, the black bishop's going to be strong when it comes to g7, but the extra move with a pawn here, because the black bishop could already develop on the other diagonal, this extra move wasted with g6, or spent with g6, you've probably got a chance to play something like h4 and get the standard attack going against a fianchettoed position. So bishop g7, bishop e3, d6 to stop e5 ideas. To give you an example, knight f6 takes an e5. I think this is just good for white. Black's knight's got no good squares and has to retreat. And well, does it have to retreat to g6? G8? I suppose it comes to. No, it can't come to h5 because of g4. So this is good for white. Black, so we'll stop that with black with d6. So queen d2, castle's long, and now white's got a target in the black king, and a very well-known plan of trying to force open the h-file with moves like g4, h4, h5, and the idea is that you would play your bishop to h6, your pawn up to h5, take on g6, and at some point we'll play takes on g7, the queen comes to h6 once the h-file is opened, and at some point we'll play queen from h6 to h7 checkmate. So it's kind of like mate in 10 or something like it. Oh, you have to swap this knight off as well, with which you can do easily enough with knight to d5. So it's sort of mate in 10, and it's up for black to come up with some way of putting you off it. I mean, I've seen all sorts of. I mean, it's probably no more than a small advantage for white this position, but I think given that you've got such an easy plan to play and a very well rehearsed plan to play, it's it's unbalanced position, which is why black might want to do it. But I think you've got very good chances here of turning this into a win. White's plan is just easier to play, I think, than black's. So that's the fianchetto defence. And I think lastly, after knight takes d4, knight ge7. There's one good idea, which I suppose is to play d5. Or you can stop that easily enough. But there's a second idea. Black's going to swap on d4, and after we take back with the queen, they're going to play knight on e2 to c6, hitting the queen again and say, haha, I've hit your queen. But big deal. So knight c3 stops d4 and takes knight c6, and now, well, not one way you go really. I think the line I see in the books is to play the queen down to d2, and then we'll put the bishop on b2. I mean, there are probably some other ways of playing this. I mean, looking at the ideas from the centre game, I think I might put the queen on e3, play bishop to d2, castle queenside, and see where the black king is. But the line I've picked out, queen to d2, black might all reply with bishop to b4. We'll chase the bishop away, which actually gives us extra time to play things like knight to d5 and bishop to b2. And now we've got good chances to attack the black king with, as they say, Horwitz bishops lined up against the king on these two fine diagonals. No, other fine diagonal here, or the diagonal here. So I think white's got good chances in that sort of position, and this defence really isn't very often played. I'm sure there are other moves that black can play, but I think those are the most important ones. And it's not hard to think of decent ideas for yourself, I think, in some of these lines. And as long as you're sensible and play good ideas, you bring more ideas to the game than your opponent will, I think you'll do well with the Scotch.